So we've just been to Berlin, Emily and I was just literally saying to Emily, it'd be great, if we could just get a train here like you can to Paris. And then later that day, the Prime Minister and Merz, I think you say, the Chancellor of Germany, announced a non-stop rail line to Berlin. That's amazing. Welcome to the Internet Seriously, a humorous look at tech, news and politics. I'm Lucian Taylor in Oxford.
I'm Emily Taylor in Oxford.
I'm Alice Taylor in Oxford.
And today we welcome our special guest, PR genius, Sussex man, radio show host and dear friend, Guy Bellamy.
From Berlin.
Guy, we'll get back to you in a second, but today, coming up, our friends at the World Economic Forum have just published a paper, Quantum Technologies, Key Strategies and Opportunities for Financial Service Leaders. So we thought we'd go in at the deep end with the techie stuff first. We'll discuss what they highlight as key challenges in adoption and implementation of quantum technologies within the financial services sector. Got that out. Next, Emily has just given the opening keynote at the International Data Law Forum, a group of legal professionals seeking to navigate the global data landscape. We share our thoughts on this very interesting forum. And finally, in Oxford, we're in the build-up to the Oxford Information Lab's Cake Bake-Off. We'll discuss a late-minute revision to the rules and implications for millions of cake enthusiasts. So while Guy fixes his earpiece, we will just welcome Guy, and there is method in our madness.
Testing.
Of talking about the World Economic Forum paper, because Guy cut his bread and butter, if that is a term, in the finance
is that
industry.
Even cut his teeth?
I think cut his teeth, whatever,
Well, I still haven't mastered the earpiece, but there we are.
Well, anyway, Guy's background is from PR and marketing in the finance sector, and so Guy, there's a nervousness about this new super boosted technology, which Alice is going to dig a bit into and has a few questions for you. But really, it's also looking at that from the finance industry. There's a race at the moment. There are problems with, obviously, endless challenges, Emily, you were saying, with security implications. But quantum theory, and let's not get too deep into it, but through a process of technologies of supposition, superposition, and entanglement, ions are controlled so that they can parallel process multiple equations. What does that mean? That means that things that are normally what we call computationally exhaustive using current methodologies, if you want to scan threats or you want to look at market share options, you do that with computers sort of one at a time. Say you want to find particular text in a library, you have to go through every book in the library, whereas quantum, you can kind of relate all the books together at the same time and look at everything all at the same time. It super accelerates. So if you're doing things like portfolio management, your portfolio managers are going to have these amazing tools that mean that they can look at millions of market signals and really deal with fractions of pennies and build up portfolios in that way. So it seems that we're heading in a world where there's going to be big winners and quite a lot of losers. The winners are those who get there first. From your experience of working in that industry, what do you think the big threats are here?
Well, I've always felt, and in context to the global signal exchange, is the one sector that I think in some ways struggles with change and struggles with how to deal with data and threats is probably financial services. So heavily regulated. So, we all see from the adverts when you see them on TV, the amount of small print, so heavily regulated. And in some ways, therefore, caution, but also fundamental, maybe cultural things on how can you do data sharing of signals and the important stuff that you're about, which isn't so much quantum, but when you have to have big walls around your castle.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
therefore, but sometimes those walls around the castle can itself be restrictive.
Now, Emily, you were
I wanted to
interested
ask you,
in
Guy.
this.
So, has there been? I know that, like in some aspects of the finance sector, like insurance, there's been a lot of consolidation. Has that been the same in banking as well, where there's been a lot of merger and acquisitions? Because part of what happens on the technical side is what we call legacy systems. So a system belongs to the acquisition target,
Yeah.
and then it's kind of sitting there and nobody really knows what to do with it, and that makes technical change very expensive and very difficult. Is that the case in the
Well, I've been
finance
spending a lot
sector?
of time lately cutting my bread and butter. So I'm not
I like it more and more as I hear it.
with a nice bit of Philadelphia. But I'm not as involved in the financial sector as I once was. But I remember a key period, for example, which seems a long time ago, but probably wasn't, was after the banking crisis and after the meltdown 2009, 2011. Obviously, nationalisation, a lot of banks were forced to merge. And I remember then, some of these big brands that came together, they still had different brands on the high street and they still had different systems. So you go into one bank to talk about your mortgage and another bank to talk about your current account, and they're the same group, and they didn't talk to each other. So, but that wasn't something for 2010. That probably would have run to about 2015. So I think there are lots of issues, but I think I think my big takeout is we're going into a world which you're leading on data sharing in the right way with threat signals, and culturally some sectors will find that a challenge.
Yes,
that's
and
a big
promise is security and fraud detection. But Alice, I saved the best till last. I welcomed our guests first, but you raised this topic of the key challenges for quantum adoption in finance and this paper. Tell us what you discovered from it.
I'm researching, quantum cryptography, and I think the problem here is that it's actually really simple. And when we start saying words like quantum, everybody panics because they don't know what they're talking about and they want to sound clever. And you get people talking about cats in boxes and, entanglement and all these superpositions. None of that matters. As far as we're concerned, thinking about quantum cryptography, this is like, we're about to invent cars, please put seatbelts in the cars. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's like, if you don't make banks quantum secure, there's going to be disasters. And actually, so NIST have published their algorithms, which are classical encryption.
Sorry, just break that down.
So
NIST.
the National
Thingy.
Institute of Standards and Technology for America. They have published algorithms which use classical encryption, so that's the computers that we're all using, but which will be, hopefully, quantum secure. So that means that today, if you're a bank, you can start implementing quantum secure cryptography. But the problem that we're seeing in the financial sector is that everybody's panicking, and also a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today of like portfolio enhancement, and that using quantum computing for good is all sort of getting all confused, because there's the security problem, but there's also quantum computing generally, and it's actually a very simple problem. With a very simple
Is that
solution.
when you think about consolidation, Alice, what we've seen before in the last 20 years is it's a bit like the oil rush. The first there takes it all.
Yeah.
They've got the drills, they can drill your land as well as their land. Aren't they panicking more about market competitive issues rather than? I think the security issues are absolutely paramount. We need quantum encryption. Also, we need quantum in real-time threat analysis. You were talking about the security implications for that, Emily. What do you think, Emily? Is it a market fear or is it a technology fear? I mean, you saw the paper itself from the World Economic Forum, and they are talking about key challenges, the hurdles being actually putting quantum solutions into practice is a big scientific and engineering challenge. There's cost and scalability issues. When you look at the actual technology itself, deep freezing going to absolute zero to run a chip that can have ions held in that actual stability that you need to achieve entanglement. I think entanglement is a real challenge. And finally, the talent to get the talent.
So to answer your question, I think there's a lot going on, and I think that organisations that have got a lot of inertia built in, because they're very large, they have very complex decision-making processes. The first question, I think, the threshold question is this actually real, or is it hype? You know, I've been talking about quantum coming soon for the last 10 years, and currently the horizon is 10 years.
10 to 15,
That, for a bank, for a CEO, is probably not just your successor, but your successor's successor, who will have to bear the brunt of decisions that you're making now or not making. So the first thing is this really a thing? Which everybody with new technology has to do that calculus. And secondly, I think that people also, you know, that siloed thinking that we're drawn into as people is like the security people will be thinking, how do we, you know, ensure that people's money remains safe against bad actors? And then the innovation, the R&D people will be like, oh my goodness, this, as you said, Lucian, at the beginning, there is so much about the power of quantum that is completely transformative and game-changing.
There's a lot to talk about here, and there's four of us, and we're super chatty, and we've got a lot to say, but I'm going to give our guest the last word, which is, we've been talking, you mentioned the Global Signal Exchange, and we've been talking to big tech, governments, you know, there's an appetite for change. This is about culture, isn't it? Because the banks, when we get into discussions with them, and things are changing, you know, we're getting more and more banks who are becoming super interested in what's happening, but there is this more conservative attitude. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, and you, two comments bringing both Lucy and what you and Emily both said, and Alice, is winner takes all versus cautious culture. Don't want to lose the race rather than win the race. Interesting. So the timing, but I think the other thing, which is really important with all this stuff in this sector, particularly this sector, is customer impact, investor impact, and user impact. It's not necessarily about market position. It's not necessarily about shareholder value. It's not necessarily about, it's actually about what it means to the person at the end who deals with that brand.
Yep, thank you very much. Now, before we go on to our guilty pleasure, I just wanted to mention...
Not bread and butter, is it?
Well, we can say that. I just forgot to mention at the beginning, so maybe put the camera onto someone else, not me, because I know that there's some technical challenges around this. Please hit subscribe to this channel. You can see the buttons there below. We've got... follow on Apple Podcast as well, and rate and review, particularly if you like us, but even if you want to shout and argue about something that we've just said. So I've given that little bit of media time to play. So now it's time for our guilty pleasure online. Thank you very much. Our guest gets both hits today. Guy Bellamy, what is your guilty pleasure online?
My guilty pleasure, well, it's kind of online, offline, and I think it's quite topical. Last weekend, for those of us of a certain age will remember it, was the 40th anniversary of Live Aid. And what struck me, Shaggy Dog Sweet, but what struck me watching the excellent BBC documentary and also BBC's 7-hour highlights rerun last weekend is how much the world has changed since 1985. If you wanted to donate money, you had to send a Gyro Bank check or go to a bank and here's all the phone numbers and sort codes. There's no link, there's nothing on your phone. And that made me think even more that, I mean, Live Aid was a phenomenal day, but it was also a phenomenal day to the non-internet, non-social media, non-smartphone world, where actually getting all these people together in one place now happens every day in life.
I mean, Alice, I want to come to you because you're a professional musician. You really know what you're doing there. You've played some of the most fantastic venues in Oxford. Your grandmother wrote 70% of the lyrics for David Bowie's Heroes.
Oh, my word.
So, you know, looking back at Live Aid at the time, Emily and I remember it's a momentous, you know, it was a transformation. Something changed forever. when I look back at it now, it looks like a scruffy sort of great big gig.
I mean, so the
Bob
first
Geldof
thing to
was
say
with.
is, I don't think I was born
No.
when Live Aid
So your
happened.
view is like my view of the war. You know,
Yeah,
I'm kind of
well,
looking
also,
back at
like,
this footage.
Because there's a lot of stuff now of people being like, it was just a bit of a mess, production-wise, of kind of all just like, quick, let's
I
get
look
these
at net
people together.
effect because I was a consumer, and for me it was on telly, non-stop. Phil Collins played on one stage in London, then flew across all the way around the world, and then play on another stage. And there's some controversy about that I only discovered last night. But just looking back through that lens, you weren't there before I refer to Emily and Guy to talk about this more, because it was momentous for people of our generation. What is your view through that? You must know some of the artists that were playing there. There's a band called Led Zeppelin. There's another band called
Generally, the view
U2.
in my generation is kind of like, this wasn't perhaps very ethically great. And
Really?
a lot of what
Wow.
happened with the money from Band Aid and Live Aid didn't really go to the right people.
Right.
Didn't go to the right places.
Gosh.
Or that's one view.
that
I think
is-
that
yeah.
Bob Geldof would refute that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
but
because I think Bob Geldof, there was a quote about him sort of saying, like, I will, so I don't know what the words were, I don't think it's this, but like, I don't care if I do a deal with the devil as long as we help all these starving people in Africa. And then it's kind of like, well, the money went to the devil, not the starving people in Africa. But from what I know since then, he and everyone around Live Aid have done a lot of work to try and redress, you know, the...
I mean,
that
Emily,
happening.
there was Live Aid, but there was also singles, wasn't there? There was these two singles as a
Band-Aid.
yeah, the Band-Aid. The
Band-Aid.
single, I mean, the thing that really struck me watching the documentary was Bob Geldof saw a news snippet done by Michael Burke, and it's extraordinarily evocative. It's only like a few minutes long, but it literally changed his life.
Yeah.
And he watched it. His partner, Paula Yates, couldn't bear to watch it because she's just had a baby. She's just upstairs crying. And that inspired him. And a lot of the single then took shape in the next day or two as he walked around Chelsea and
It was
saw
the
his
next day.
mates.
Yeah, it was the next
And
day. Yeah.
and you know, he was walking around, saw Sting, had a chat to Midge because he was on the tube, and you know, it's just like it was so thrown together. And I think that context really makes you forgive a lot of the thing about like the single itself. Is it that great? Who cares? It raised a lot of money, and it brought together like amazing artists of the day, some of whom are no longer with us, like George Michael, incredible artist. But I remember, you know, the Live Aid concert was the summer after I left school, and I remember it like you as a real moment in my life, and it was very funny for me watching. There were people who couldn't really work out whether to give it the full welly of a rock concert. Because it's about starving people in Africa, so they looked a bit kind of shuffly and a bit disorganised. And the acts that really took it seriously, like Queen, U2, George Michael, they rehearsed like crazy, and they gave everyone a show. And I think it changed a lot of their careers.
I want to push back a bit on Alice, because I think we try as a generation. I really don't like the internet seriously becoming about generational ribbing, but I do think that we are looking back more and more at things in the sort of telescope in reverse, the lens, looking back at those times. We're discovering a lot about our past, the Jimmy Saviles, the sort of stuff that was really happening, which was deeply offensive. But there also was a patriarchy. There was like lack of help for Africa.
I can see
this
Guy reacting on
I've got
this.
two very strong views on it. Right, first thing, and this is I've had this with my children, I've had this with people I work with, is I cannot, still not to this day, comprehend how no one was born when Live Aid was on. I presume. I didn't watch Live Aid. I was like, what do you mean you weren't born? That's not acceptable. I mean, everyone had to. It's just when they share things. But I think the other thing, and touching back to the Global Singer Exchange, I think Bob Geldof is a hero for everyone to take lessons from, because that man walked through walls. He saw something on TV. Everything he did had not, couldn't be done. Are you going to get these bouffant pop stars to give their time up and turn up for the day? Midge and him didn't know if anyone were going to turn up. But then Harvey Goldsmith, let's do a thing at Wembley and let's announce the bands before we've asked them. And then let's do a...
Sorry, he announced the bands before he talked to the
if
bands.
You watch the documentary. But then also let's do a satellite link up with it. But that'd never been done before, even for the Olympics.
He got Margaret Thatcher to give away the VAT on the single by just talking to her.
I think what Live Aid is about, and also let's not forget, in the age of millionaire pop stars selling lots of records, during the miners' strike, poll tax era, tough times, record unemployment, it was the pop stars that stood up for famine, not the governments. We should never forget that.
Alice, there was one story about Fortnum and Mason ringing him up and saying, "You've done this single and we're thinking of putting it in the window of Fortnum and Mason's." So I think he even bridged the class divide.
But can you imagine, though, going back to the guilty pleasure, can you imagine, and it's about how much we take for granted with what the internet age enables. That monumental day was done in the age before the internet, before mobile phones, before Google searches, before Instagram posts and group chats with their fans. It was done in a thing. You have to get a coupon from the paper to send a check in, or it was which also makes you celebrate what the internet has enabled, because if that was done today, so much more would be possible.
I have a final point for Alice, and it sort of plays on this thing of Berlin, because Berlin, for our family, Alice, has a strange connection, because Alice has done a documentary about my mother, who wrote much of the lyrics of Heroes and sent them as a poem to David Bowie.
It's
fascinating. But there are some lyrics that are actually not hers, and they are the ones about... She wrote a poem about dolphins and dolphins swimming and stuff like this, and there are other lyrics inserted there about guns being shot over people's heads and stuff, which are nothing to do with her rhetoric and sentiment and her artistic values at all, and were actually about David Bowie in Berlin, Alice. Isn't that... and so what I'm trying to get to is, I think, and it links with Live Aid, is transformation through song, transformation through an event. You've arranged musical events and stuff like that. Can you...
Yeah, well, it's said that song led to the fall of the Berlin Wall by some critics, which is... an interpretation about how impactful music and art can be.
And I think it's that thing of how at the time there wasn't enough happening with the politics. And Bob Geldof sort of cut across that, and within a few weeks you saw him.
Ethiopia was a kind of communist-backed state.
Yes.
And what the musicians did for that day, and Bob Geldof literally did it, they just walked... They knew, and think what you're doing with the Global Signal Exchange, which itself is brave. It's taking something to the world and dealing with caution and agendas and conservatism. Take inspiration from Bob Geldof. Just walk through the wall, because that's what he did.
Thank you very much. Next up, Emily, you've just given the keynote, the opening keynote at the International Data Law Forum, which is a group of legal professionals. And when I say that, it's like judges and barristers and lawyers, a big, big deal. Their mission is sort of navigating the global data landscape, going back to the Global Signal Exchange. Some takeaways from that, Emily. The International Data Law Forum, IDLF, which I think, I'm not going to say what that's very similar to another IDF that I know, but serves as a crucial platform dedicated to fostering understanding and discussion around the intricate world of global data laws and regulations. Why does that matter?
It matters hugely because, of course, the internet... Guy, you've just been talking about how different an event like Live Aid would be now. Data wants to flow internationally. The internet doesn't respect national borders, and yet laws and people are very local in their thinking. And so these sort of events and these sort of groupings are incredibly important to foster mutual understanding and to talk about the problems.
And what was the essence of your opener for the community? What did you bring to that?
I talked about actually first of all, about, I talked about the global I led to the global signal exchange, but there were various points that I was trying to build up. First of all, that competitors need, such as I took the example of British Airways and Virgin. Do you remember the time when the Millennium Wheel was struggling to be raised, sponsored by British Airways, and Richard Branson opportunistically jumped in with an airship saying BA can't get it up. Right? But at the same time, the airline industry always cooperates on security.
Yeah.
So there's the cooperation competition. And then there's an idea that Alice sort of brought up from her healthcare background, which is about the parallels with safeguarding. And the Victoria Columbier case, where so many different either care providers, doctors, hospitals, even charities had noticed this child and her plight, but none of them felt confident enough to do anything.
And just
she
quickly,
died.
What does safeguarding require you to do?
Share information. That's one of the biggest things. And I think what really struck me and why I talked about this is because, I've been safeguarding trained again and again and again, and that it's all about share information that is neutral. It might not necessarily be an indicator of abuse, but just if you feel a bit suspicious, share information.
So, Emily, what's the problem? You've got a bunch of lawyers who are responsible for enabling data sharing. What's their problem?
Well, the laws are really, really scary, because if you get it wrong, you have turnover-based fines, and particularly for US companies where they have a very litigious society, a very different approach to making laws. It's sort of black letter interpretation is what we say. It's like, what does the law say? Comply in a very conservative way, and that means they're like, we're not sharing. And they have all the data. So there was a great panel after my speech I wanted to talk about.
Yes, I wanted to pick out, because you're going to talk about that. I was just sitting there as a punter. I've lived with a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. But what I was expecting was you to confront this, vast place full of lawyers with we've got to step up, we've got to do better. And I was expecting sort of exactituding and sort of we can't possibly do this because it will put our clients at risk and stuff. And what came out of it, the words, I wrote down 6 short things that I heard from this event, and there seemed to be complete unity. They regarded GDPR, the European Commission's, they were like, GDPR is about data and sharing data. Now, data is in every part of our life. So they're actually legislating about everything. Car tires were being discussed, ice creams were being discussed. What they described this was as legal colonialism. 100% difference between the technical community and this new legal framework.
I'd quite like to comment on this because so the example, the case study I gave you of Victoria Columbier, a famous safeguarding example of a child who was murdered. She had 128 injuries when she was but all these it's like the thing of people who can see different parts of an elephant but they don't talk to each other. Lord Laming, who did the Laming inquiry into her death, said that the law has always been very clear that it's very important you have a duty to share information where there is concern of abuse. And then he followed up on it 10 years later and said, we're still stuck with this data sharing law. People get scared because the law, they feel they're going to get in trouble for sharing information.
And Emily, I want to come to you next, and then Guy on the comms thing about this, because there really seems to be something stuck here. GDPR is meant to protect and enforce human rights, and I'd like you to develop on that point, really, because human rights are not just about rights to privacy, they are about rights to commerce. Instead, we have, and this was being said in Berlin, we have surveillance capitalism, and GDPR is essentially a bureaucratic surveillance tool.
Yes, that was one of the more controversial statements there. The thing that struck me in the discussion is that one of the foundational concepts for transferring data out of the European Union is this concept of adequacy. So do I know that the country where this data is going to land has similar protections, has equivalent protections? We're now 8 years on from GDPR coming into force, and there have been something like 15 adequacy decisions. These include Andorra, the Faroe Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, the European Patent Office. Now, how, on the scale of very hard, very impactful...
Did they do one for Truro?
I don't know if they've got Truro in there. Maybe that could be next. But one of the speakers said, at this rate, it will take 500 years to cover the entire planet.
Yeah.
Guy, we've got this thing. I mean, what I felt, because there was, with respect, a brave person from the European Commission there online as well. I feel, and I'm really not trying to take sides here, but you know, because I had great hopes as a young person for the EU, for everybody coming together. But there's this thing, is there not, of in practice what's actually transpiring is, and you see it with organisations like ICANN, you see it with organisations like FIFA, the Football Association, where they've got this massive power, this sort of almost monopolistic power. They're not voted there. They're you know, and they almost make statements of righteousness. It's almost like they can never be wrong. They have clearly made a mistake with GDPR, and they're now talking about lots of corrections as though it's part of the whole story. It's a bit
like potholes, I think, and I'm not a tech expert, but you know, we've all taken our cars to garages and had a few wheels replaced. We've all been there. I've even had wreck suspension. We've all been there, particularly the country lanes down in Sussex, which are really bad. And the answer to it is let's grant £1 million to local councils and put some porridge in them.
Right.
And
yeah.
then, and it's like, no, fix the roads.
Yeah.
And it's with the way you talk about data, and its seamlessness and its universality. The picture in my mind, because I think of my garden where I have an office, is all the squirrels running through the trees. So they skip and they jump and they go everywhere. And some of these big businesses you're talking about are just like large cows or horses just standing there munching the grass. And it's like, if you want, you've got to go at the speed of the squirrels if you want to fix this. And I think, so because it's so big and so universal and goes through geographies and challenges, it goes back to the Bob Geldof thing, the thing to see the big picture, because no one can see the big picture and have the balls to take it on. Excuse my French. That's a ball, that's a game. People deal with bits.
Yes,
and they like to put things in bits. It makes them feel in control, and of course they're not in control, and it makes them feel safe. And actually what they're not doing, going back to the potholes, is all they're doing is putting porridge in holes.
Yes, and we have an example of that in Oxford. We live in East Oxford, where poorer workers tend to live. And the potholes are very much what we call tactical strategy. You find a new crack in the road, you fill it up. You've got
with
water,
bread and butter, actually.
With bread and butter.
Cutting the bread and butter.
Sorry, Guy, whatever they can find, bread and butter would be better material than what they're obviously using. And some of them are like water leaking out of it. But you go to North Oxford, where there are wealthier people who are more articulate in arguing for causes. And the roads almost, would you agree, Emily? They're almost in Summertown, central North Oxford. They're almost like rubber.
That's because everyone's got private helicopters.
I just want to close our data protection discussion with absurd examples of the privacy rights of inanimate objects. So one panellist talked about having to fill in forms to protect the privacy of his winter tyres.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a law that's supposed to protect identifiable humans. Okay. Our garage door, I couldn't get it fixed because of data protection, I assume, of the garage door.
Right.
Yeah. And also one of the speakers talked about having to navigate the same provisions and the same processes to deal with at once a terrorist threat and shampoo coupons. Is this right? Have we got it right?
One other one. Data,
I wouldn't know about shampoo. I haven't got any hair.
One of them said, under the current laws, data cannot go to New York. Humans can go to New York. Data can go to Russia. absolutely extraordinary. You've got this thing where you can fly European citizens to New York, but you can't fly data to New York. Absolutely extraordinary.
Bizarre.
Anyway, before we move on to finally the headline of today's Internet Seriously, it's time for our Tech Room 101. Room 101. Guy Bellamy, I already know this. This is a real wind-up.
I'm going to sing you a karaoke Chris Rea now. No, I'm not. I'm joking.
Guy, what is your Tech Room 101?
My Tech Room 101 is something I actually don't know much about, so you're going to have to come in and help me on this, because my knowledge is like one of those squirrels in my garden. But I have been reading a lot, and I actually have had lots of people who are not techies talk to me about, which is a sign that people are worried. The social media reaction to one of the file sharing platforms, which everyone uses. There was concern, which I heard secondhand from someone a couple of days ago, about terms and conditions changing, about did that mean data was being used for AI training? Did it mean that they had ownership on the files they transported? My knowledge on this is very limited. I'm a history graduate. I don't understand these things.
Yeah, Alice.
But please come in, but what was interesting is how quickly something which kicked off on social media. I had one of our cleaning staff talk to me about it. I say one, we've only got one cleaner, but sort of facilities person. I had someone who's a client who has nothing to do with technology. I had people from different walks of life through my work circle. I had a research company. Everyone was talking about it, and therefore it is a thing.
It's a thing.
So Alice, please.
So interestingly, wetransfer have never and will never use AI to scrape data that is shared. And what happened was they did change the wording in their terms and conditions, saying that the service had a right to reproduce, modify, distribute, and publicly display content, which is quite worrying. And the social media backlash was so significant that they then went, sorry guys,
Corrective
we're
statement.
clarifying
Yeah.
the wording in our terms and conditions so that there can be no misunderstanding. But I think it is really interesting because everyone is so charged at the moment about anything to do with AI scraping that you can get these explosive reactions just from, something that you'd never have thought, like, WeTransfer have changed some words in their terms and conditions.
Can I throw a question for both of you? Sorry, I know you're hasting, because what I take from this is I use WeTransfer all the time.
Yes.
We're all service audio files,
Love and
files,
trust.
Love and trust, love and trust. The big takeout from this is a classic case. None of us ever read terms and conditions.
Emily, what
Both of you.
Emily,
Including
how
business
Emily,
leaders.
how is this different from all the other social media platforms and everybody else's terms and conditions?
Well, I will just say I'm spending quite a lot of my life at the moment as a surrogate legal counsel, internal legal counsel, negotiating an awful lot of data sharing agreements for the Global Signal Exchange, which is a great privilege to have. And so when I saw this story, so we're talking about clause 6.3, everybody.
Oh, very nice.
And what rights were protected with it. I think that there were several red flags in the original wording, including the right to commercially exploit. And my take on it is, perhaps I speculate that somebody in the legal department was doing what you do best as a lawyer, which is covering every base. We may not want to do that right now, but let's give ourselves the anchors, the keys to do it, so we don't have to revisit this, because it's always painful to change your terms and conditions. And I think that they were stunned by the ferocity of the backlash, and this is a conversation that I will often have in negotiating data sharing. Is like, well, you've put in all of these things. Are you actually planning to do any of those things? No. We would quite like to. Would you quite like to have them? No, they're completely irrelevant to us. And I think often that business conversation doesn't happen between the lawyers and their more business side. And I think that this, I felt it was a PR thing, where the company itself is very trusted and hugely used by many people without question. And they're like, no, we never do this stuff. We're not going to. We're not planning to. Don't say it.
But the right to publicly publish So Guy, your transferred content.
Yeah.
There is something, is there not, about the role of literally wetransfer as a mediatory body? It's a sort of trusted in middle. Their job is to ship stuff. It's like DHL saying we have the right to open.
It's like being a bank. It's like being a delivery company. But my take on this, which is what I found fascinating on Room 101, is I remember when I get almost every terms and conditions, whether it's from Apple or from John Lewis or whatever, is they build them. This is my consumer perspective. It'd be nice to, if listeners and viewers have got any views. People now construct terms and conditions to encourage you not to look at them. It's like you're busy. Here's a 7,000-page document. If you want, you can just skip and accept at the bottom. That has to change because what I picked up from my experience down in Sussex last week, what I saw was not people having read the terms and conditions. They required someone else to read them, to flag it, so everyone else thought that's outrageous. Whereas we need to get to an environment. If you think about your banking, if you think about your online shopping, if you think about online mortgages, think about your travel plans, your travel insurance, whatever it is, how many times do you actually read the terms and conditions?
I have to say, though, we could live in a different culture like in Japan, where any contract you have to sit through the reading of, like, you're going to rent a new place, you have to sit there while someone reads every word of the terms and conditions to you.
This is super exciting. We're running out of time. Okay. Normally I'd wrap this after 43 minutes, but it's so exciting and I can't leave out our headline article today. MasterChef is obviously going to be taken offline for the whole of next year, and I want to propose to the BBC an alternative, which is the Oxford Information Labs Cake Bake Off. Emily, do you want to talk a bit about it? Oh, we're missing an AI of Guy Bellamy, who from Elephant Communications with his own elephant
That's
cake.
not enormously flattering.
No, but it's on the way, isn't it?
I was
Emily, what is the Oxford Information Labs Cake Bake Off? What is the Cake Bake Off?
I've got to say, I'm sorry, but for listeners who listen to the internet seriously, they're going to be like, what is Oxford Information Labs? What is the Bake Off?
Alice, take it away.
Take it away.
So Oxford Information Labs is the company that...
The parent company behind the Internet Seriously.
The Internet Seriously. And we have a baking competition in the summer where we make a cake.
Are you making a cake, Alice?
I am making a cake, but I cannot disclose any details about my cake in case, it impacts the judgment.
Very good.
But so Emily, we had a last-minute flutter and change to the rules in the last week
there
or so.
Has been a lot of... get techies involved in something.
My idea, I've got so much to say about this, was to crowdsource the rules with a public document that everybody in the company could access and edit.
What are the issues here? Don't you just bake a cake?
T's and C's, red and Japanese.
Don't you just bake a cake? Terms and conditions of the bake-off, because we've had controversy before of like, are cookies allowed? Could you make a Bakewell tart? Could you make a pie?
Is that controversial?
Still a baked good. Well, there were huge arguments.
Can you get somebody else to make the cake for you?
You know what I've done in the past?
What have you done?
I've bought a Waitrose cake and re-iced it, and I won.
Yeah.
Did you?
Even the re-icing.
Some of us are going to Marks and Spencer's later today. There's been a new category of best disqualified cake.
Yes, best disqualified cake.
And again, the wording of that had to be best disqualified cake, not most disqualified cake, because then we were like, you'll get like poisonous cakes with like a shoe in them.
How do you judge the winner? How do you judge the winner?
There's multiple categories. So we've got tastiest cake, best presentation, best overall, and best disqualified.
Because really, it's being democratic, thinking about data and equality and openness. You don't need judges going around with rosettes, because that's quite Women's Institute. It should be based on which cake is eaten first.
Well, and then there is a question about the judges.
Yes,
Emily, there's a question about the judges as well.
Okay, the judges are landlords.
Okay, let's be nice to them.
We'll be very nice to them. Well, there was a report of a one-to-one conversation between one former winner,
twice winner,
former champion, and somebody who had entered cookies in a previous year, which caused many, many years of controversy. A one-to-one conversation between that person and the judges.
And some
Do
people
we know what was
This
said?
is- this
We
is
don't
all-
know what was said.
We're talking exclusives for the Oxford Mail here, kids.
I think
But-
it's
I have something else to say,
Oh,
which
something
is
else.
that there is, as you can see behind us, a trend of some hyper-realistic cake attempts.
Oh my gosh.
Because we were discussing that maybe this year should be a normal bake-off, but next year should be a is it real or is it cake, which is this
I
online.
see
Well, I say
AI
trend.
cake.
It was from years ago of like
Right.
you make this microphone but out of cake, and it's like you literally have them side by
Yeah.
side, and you cannot tell them apart.
So
Could I
Wow.
suggest for
Yeah.
your landlord, just as a thought, because it's about love and well-being and health,
Yes.
and it's all
and,
about
and
good
low
vibes.
rent.
And low rent.
rent discount. Maybe along with saying thank you for judging, you buy them a gym membership, because they're probably going to be quite large after eating all your cakes.
We've had enough. Right, thank you very much, everybody. This has been absolutely fascinating. Before we sign off, and this is a passion topic. So BBC, that's a serious offer. You need to replace MasterChef with the Oxford Information Labs Bake Off.
Marvellous.
It's a passion project. You've got techies doing this. It's going to be fantastic. You'll make millions. But aside from that, do we have a comment of the week?
Oh yeah, we do have a comment of the week. I just need to find it again.
I mean, you came up with some good ones earlier
So
from that
this was
content.
Yeah.
about. I thought it was quite funny. We got some positive feedback.
From one of this is from an internet
just
series.
someone saying a nice thing about our podcast, but then I was like,
Really?
is this actually? Is this like a
landlord.
secret
Oh, is
insult?
this an AI bot or
Uh,
Was
something?
it your landlord?
Where's it gone? It was about. There was lots of
There was lots of
appreciation
love
the
for the
Dalek.
Dalek.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Dalek singing
It's
Jet
not
2.
about the Dalek. It was about.
I'll give you-
Okay, it was about Just Stop Games. So, okay, do you think this is a compliment or do you think it's a secret insult? I love this format. It feels very calm and focused, not sensationalized or like it's trying to keep me watching at all times. We'll look up your stuff for more.
Oh, I take
So I'm
that
like,
as
that's
read.
very nice.
No, yeah,
I
no.
would say,
But are they saying it's
I would
boring?
say thank you. Please send us your contact details. There's a nice cake in the post next week
There's going to
Possibly
be
10.
12
Yeah.
cakes
from
in
the
post.
bronze winner.
Thank you very much. We've been talking about a new World Economic Forum paper that's just published about quantum technologies in the financial sector. Emily has opened a keynote, done the opening keynote at the International Data Law Forum, and we fed back on some quite alarming results from that. There's a strange AI of me in the background of me. And finally, in Oxford,
You're
we've
quite
been
like Chris Rea,
discussing
Your
the
hyper-realistic
huge
cake.
Oxford Information Labs Cake Bake Off, which will give you the results of that next week. Thank you very much.
From the stripy T-shirt.